Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Rock Show. I'm Rocker Mike. How you doing, Rob?
I'm pretty good. How you doing today?
I'm doing real good, real good. We're back now for another episode, and we're talking about psychobilly music. What's that? What's
Yeah.
psychobilly music?
Well, it's Psychobilly. I had no idea.
Okay. Well, you know what rockabilly music is, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, rockabilly's been around since the 50s. Uh, it's been a popular genre in America. It's been even more popular in places like England and France and stuff like that as well.
Yeah.
But there's a little subset of it called psychobilly. And I kind of wanted to do a show on this because, we could talk about, you know, 20 different rockabilly bands. But psychobilly is something that's a little more extreme than the rockabilly stuff. Okay. I would think the most perfect example of psychobilly would be the Cramps.
Cramps. All right.
Okay. And we did a great 2-part show on the Cramps. God, when was that? That was
2 years ago.
that was pre-COVID, man. I think that was like 2020 pre-COVID or 2019 even. I remember we did it in 7B. Wow. Yeah, that was a 2-part. Remember I had the records and everything?
Yeah.
Yeah. But the Cramps are one of these, they're one of my all-time favorite bands, and they kind of drew from different things. They drew from rockabilly music, they drew from garage rock music, and other weird things, and they kind of created psychobilly. But psychobilly itself kind of has been around even before then. Okay, there were people that were doing like a very twisted kind of rockabilly music. And we're going to talk about 3 acts today. 2 of them fall in that category that are, pre-Cramps sounding. Okay, that would be Hasil Adkins, the Legendary Stardust Cowboy. Okay, and the third group we're going to talk about is the Meteors, who were kind of like parallel to the Cramps in some ways. Very interesting band. Not a lot is known about them, and they're kind of mysterious. The Cramps had that mystery about them as well. You didn't really kind of know a lot about the individuals, other than that weird personality that they put out there.
Yeah.
But they were very private. Lux and Ivy were very private. And the term psychobilly, the first time that I think, in my knowledge, that the term psychobilly was ever used was in a Johnny Cash song called One Day at a Time. Oh my God, look that up quick. Not One Day at a Time. Johnny Cash. One Piece at a Time. Excuse me. My brain froze up right there. One Piece at a Time. Okay, which is a song that came out in the early 70s. It's about a guy working in a car factory, and he's stealing all the parts to a Cadillac, but he does it over like a 40-year period. Okay, and he's got all these parts, and he finally puts the car together, and it's all different. Nothing fits. He's got one tail light that's different than the other. It's because all the models changed. And at the end of the song, it's a funny song. It's a good song. And it's done in kind of a rockabilly sound, the way Johnny Cash sounded. And but at the end of the song, he's pretending to be talking on like a CB, and he says, I'm the psychobilly cat, something like that. And it's like I don't think that term was ever used before that. As far as I have no idea. I don't think it ever was. I think he coined it right there. So if that's true, definitely Johnny Cash coined the term, and other people picked up on it. But in the in the 50s and 60s, rockabilly was a very controversial type of music because it had sexual overtones, racial overtones to it. It was kind of like they were talking about things that people didn't discuss in songs. It was Southern kind of sounding, so people in the North didn't get it. Okay.
Yeah.
And, it had like a blues influence, which is the racial component in it, but the first one we're going to talk about is Hasil Adkins. Now,
One-man band from West Virginia.
the one-man band from West Virginia. No joke. This guy was a one-man band. Okay. He played everything at the same time. Okay. And, he was pretty much in obscurity for a long time until actually the Cramps in the very early 80s covered one of his songs. Okay. And it was called She Said. And it opened up the whole floodgates to like, who's this guy Hasil Adkins? Okay. So let's get into it. Now, he was born April 29th, 1937. He passed away April 26th, 2005. Okay. And, his genres is obviously, I call it psychobilly, but we'll just call it rockabilly for argument's sake. Okay. Yeah. Blues and also country music. He did straight up country music as well. Very unusual playing and singing style. He kind of took, I don't know if you ever heard of Charlie Feathers. We could do a whole show on Charlie Feathers. I didn't want to include him in this. Charlie Feathers is an amazing rockabilly guy. Definitely, you could say like an originator of what would be psychobilly, but I'd like to save that maybe for a whole show just on him. But Hasil took the what Charlie Feathers was doing, this kind of like hiccuping, vocaling style, very Southern, and took it to like a whole other level. Like like you almost couldn't understand him. All right.
He was very primal.
Very primal. Exactly. Okay. Again, he was a one-man band. He played guitar and drums at the same time. All right. How the fuck can you do that? All right. So being born in the Great Depression era, he grew up in poverty. And his songs, which he began recording and distributing locally by himself in the mid-50s, explored everything from sex to his love for chicken. and stuff like decapitation is mentioned in his songs. Okay.
Oh, man.
Right. Now, after the Cramps covered his song, I think around I think it's on the Bad Music for Bad People album, which came out in the early 80s. The very first drummer to the Cramps, Miriam Lena, who went on to form with her husband Billy Miller the Norton Records label, searched Hasil out and put his stuff out on Norton Records. One of the first people I think they ever signed, if I remember right. Okay, and that helped usher in this psychobilly genre that I'm talking about. So he was born in Boone County in West Virginia in 1937, and he spent pretty much his entire life in that area.
Yeah.
He was the youngest of 10 children. His father's name was Atkins, and his mother's name was originally Alice Hale. And they were raised in a tar paper shack on property rented from a local coal company. Born at the time of the Great Depression, Atkins' early life was stricken by poverty, and his parents were unable to even provide him shoes until he was about 4 or 5 years old.
Wow.
And some reports say he really only went to school to like the first grade. Okay. His given name, Hasil, is actually, we're mispronouncing it. Everybody says Hasil, but it's pronounced Hasil. Hasil. Okay. And one of his brothers was named Basil. Okay. So you had Hasil and Basil. All right. And then Hasil dated a girl one time named Hazel. Hazel. And was later given the nickname the Haze, they called her. And as Hasil explained it, the nickname came about because Starlight Records wanted something catchy, and I didn't have no middle name. That's what he said. So Hasil loved to eat chicken, but he also loved to eat meat. Okay. Now, for some reason, he wrote a lot about eating chicken and meat in his songs. Okay. He had in the year 2000, after many years of recording, he released something called Poultry in Motion.
Yeah, with the fucking chicken go-go dance.
Yeah. He toured with chicken go-go dances. His diet reportedly consisted of as much as 2 gallons of coffee a day and lots of liquor and lots of cigarettes. Okay. So aside for his fondness for poultry, Atkin claims to have had but only 3 loves in his life: guitars, girls, and cars, all of which got him in trouble over the years. One such incident occurred in 1957 when he and 3 friends drove a car off a mountain. Okay. Local newspaper reported the car tumbled 70 feet into nearby Pond Fork in West Virginia. While the driver died at the scene, Atkins survived, although he sustained a permanent back injury that for the rest of his life he had back problems. In the 80s, Atkins again found himself in trouble with the law. In 1983, he was living with his girlfriend, who was a little bit underage. Okay. And her mother reported to the police that she had been raped. And Atkins was subsequently charged with 3rd-degree sexual assault, or what would be called statutory rape of a minor less than 16 years old. In October of the same year, another relationship ended with him getting jail time when a shootout occurred between Atkins and the woman's jealous husband. No one was hurt, but Atkins was charged with a felony illegal possession of his shotgun and spent 5 months in jail. Atkins was said to suffer from insomnia and also manic depression and possibly other mental illnesses. He never married in his life. And on April 15th, 2005, Atkins was run over in his front yard by a teenager driving an ATV, an all-terrain vehicle. 11 days later, on April 26th, Atkins was found dead in his home 3 days before his 68th birthday. So that's just his crazy life. Okay. Now his career, he was nicknamed the Haze.
The Haze.
Okay. And it began in the mid 1950s in a crappy little studio in his home near Madison, West Virginia. And there he put kind of like his influences between Elvis and Jerry Lee Lewis to work by recording scores of songs, beginning with the track, one song called I'm Happy. That was his first song. In a later interview, he claimed, I couldn't afford no drums, so I just stomped my feet. He eventually learned to use percussive instruments to accompany his guitar and vocals, which would become his hallmark sound. If you ever seen him, he had like cymbals tied to his legs. Okay, and he'd smash his legs together to get them, to get that sound. Okay, in '61, he thought he was going to become famous, so he headed to California in search of that fame, and he was auditioning with different talent agencies in and around Los Angeles. With very little to go on, he actually returned to West Virginia, though he claimed he missed a callback from an agency a single day after departing for his home. And back at home, Atkins began performing at local nightclubs behind a store-bought sign that read, one of the greatest shows on earth, the one-man band, Hayes Atkins and his happy guitar. Talk about DIY, right? So the mid-1960s brought Hasil Adkins his first official release through a very small micro label with the 45 record called Chicken Walk, which was backed with the song called She's Mine. What followed were the releases of some of his most notable songs, though at the time they received little attention outside of Madison, West Virginia. She Said, the song She Said, revealed his imaginative tone in writing, in which he compared the woman of a one-night stand he had to a dying can of chicken. The song is nuts. And the Cramps do a great version of it, but the original one is totally off the wall. And he's basically wakes up and he's like, you should have seen what I had in the bed with me. It's hilarious. Okay. And, he had another song at that time he wrote called No More Hot Dogs. And it was a song about decapitating his girlfriend and keeping her head on a wall mount. God. Wow. Yeah. By the 1970s, he kind of transitioned from rockabilly to country, okay? And he produced several self-released records in the 70s. It was a tradition of his to mail a copy of each single he released to the sitting president of the United States.
Oh my God.
In 1970, he sent one to Richard Nixon. Okay. And Richard Nixon wrote back saying, "I am very pleased by your thoughtfulness in bringing these particular selections to my attention." I wonder if he actually listened to it. That's funny. Okay. Now, the early 1980s, like I was saying before, saw a resurgence in Hasil Adkins' fan base when the Cramps did a remake of She Said. The Cramps having picked up the song from the bootleg compilation called Rockabilly Bash during a UK tour. Now, the Cramps were known for their very obscure record collection themselves and obscure cover versions of things. A lot of their songs were almost covers anyway, especially early on, because they would twist things around. They would use music from different songs and incorporate it into originals. But they discovered Hasil Adkins on a 1984 UK tour, and on in a record store when they found an album called Rockabilly Bash. One thing the Cramps always did is they hit the record stores wherever they went, and they looked for obscure stuff, and they were very good at that. Very, very good at that. So in 1984, the UK label Big Beat Records, which included Hasil's original on the Psychobilly compilation, Rockabilly Psychosis and the Garage Disease. Okay, they put that version on there. Having made contact with Big Beat Records, Hasil proceeded to provide them with some of his home recorded tapes, which resulted in the album called She Said, which came out in 1985. Also in 85, he was approached by former Cramps drummer Miriam Linner and her husband Billy Miller about releasing some recordings he had on their brand new label called Norton Records. And a compilation album came out called Out to Hunch, not Lunch, Out to Hunch, in 1986, which became an underground kind of classic. Billy started managing Adkins, Billy Miller, and together with his wife, they headed to New York City for Adkins' first professional recording sessions. It only took 30 years, and it released it became the album called The Wild Man, released in 1987. And upon release, that album was featured as the New York Times Rock Album of the Week. It actually made a little splash.
Wow.
By the 1990s, Adkins gained this cult following around the world, touring regularly, receiving offers from more record labels. In 1994, Miles Copeland III of IRS Records purchased the rights to Adkins' recordings, and although an album was planned for release, it never actually materialized. IRS was a shady label. They ripped the Cramps off. They ripped a lot of people off, and the Cramps were in litigation with them for a long time. So it's not surprising it never came out. Frustrated, though, Adkins soon gained back rights to some of his songs after a deal with Mississippi blues label called Fat Possum Records, who recorded and released 1999's What the Hell Was I Thinking, and booked him on a tour alongside T-Model Ford and Elmo Williams, two rockabilly bands. Now, in 2000, Norton released a compilation of new and previous recordings about Adkins' devotion to chicken called Poultry in Motion, and included such songs as Chicken Run, Chicken Hop, Chicken Flop, Chicken Wobble, Chicken on the Bone. He likes chicken.
He loves chicken.
In total, Hasil Adkins claimed nearly 7,000 songs in his repertoire, supposedly.
Wow.
While music was his true passion, Adkins enjoyed a career in the film and television industry. He played himself as a street musician in 2004's The Heart is Deceitful Above All Things, partially narrated something called The Red's Breakfast Experience, and starred in a comedy horror film entitled Die You Zombie Bastards.
Die You Zombie Bastards.
Yeah, as a composer, he helped score Hair High in 2004. Atkins was also the subject of the Julian Nitzberg documentary, The Wild World of Hasil Adkins, which came out on Apple Shop Films. Adkins was inducted into the West Virginia Music Hall of Fame in 2018. Now, he's often cited as the important precursor to the psychobilly genre. The Cramps, of course, attribute many of their psychobilly traits to Atkins. They recorded She Said in the studio and also live on live stuff. And also, like I said, it appeared on Bad Music for Bad People, which is one of their most popular albums. It's a compilation of songs. And that helped, usher Atkins into this kind of cult status. And even bands that came later kind of picked up. Like, I don't know if you remember the Flat Duo Jets. They were pretty good. They covered a song called Let Me Come In on their 1993 album Safari. What would you call his musical style other than psychobilly? Well, Atkins was known for having an unconventional take on traditional rockabilly, which is really what psychobilly is, an untraditional take. But his unpolished sound was a praised byproduct of really like cheap studio equipment, for most of his career. And he didn't try. He says he didn't try to be primitive. It's just it ended up like that because that's all.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's funny.
He wrote. We just went into it. He wrote about chicken.
Yeah.
But some of his stuff he would write about peanut butter. He'd write about aliens or hot dogs. Okay. And that carried over when he even went more country, and he always performed as a one-man band using foot pedals to play the drums, or he stomped his feet on the floor. And often his guitar was just cheap and out of tune. Okay. He once vowed that he would play 12 to 20 instruments simultaneously, including playing the piano and organ with his elbows. He noted in interviews that his primary heroes and influences were Hank Williams, Jimmy Rogers, Little Richard, Colonel Sanders. That's hilarious.
That is funny.
Oh, man.
Colonel Sanders.
Many of his songs were accompanied by a dance of the same name. In other words, the song The Hunch, was understood to be kind of like about dry humping, like that, like in a dance. Okay. Although he never really called it, he never defined it that way, but that's how people took it. He used the term to describe anything of a sexual relation. Like he named his car the Hunchin' Wagon. Okay. All right. Now he also said the Hunch Slop was a song and dance Atkins pioneered for the drunks in his fan club, which made him so you could just go left or right or fall down or anything you want to. 2000's Poultry in Motion introduced a slew of chicken dances, the chicken walk, the chicken flop. Okay,
everything chicken. This guy.
Atkins primarily recorded and performed his own songs, although Peanut Butter Rock and Roll includes covers of Carl Perkins' Blue Suede Shoes, and he also does a version of Harry Belafonte's Deo. Okay.
Oh my God, that got to be good.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, if you go on Wikipedia, he's got some discography. Okay.
Yeah.
Even though he was putting these obscure rockabilly singles that nobody bought, all right, basically from the 50s. By 1985, he was putting out stuff. Norton picked him up, and he ended up on a couple other labels, couple other compilations. But I mean, that's it, man. I mean, what a life, okay? But he really is like a pioneer of the whole.
He's definitely a pioneer.
I mean, psychobilly in the sense of psycho, okay? Definitely. All right, so the next guy we're going to talk about is the legendary Stardust Cowboy. Now, who is that? Okay, his real name was Norman Carl Odom, O-D-A-M.
Yeah.
He was born September 5th, 1947 in Lubbock, Texas. You know who else is from Lubbock, right?
Yeah.
Buddy Holly.
Oh, yeah?
Okay, same town. Now, he was known professionally, obviously, as the legendary Stardust Cowboy, and he's an outsider performer who's considered one of the pioneers of psychobilly music, all right, particularly in the 1960s. Now, Odom was always interested in space travel, Okay. And from an early age in his childhood, even at kindergarten, he used to look at the moon and tell himself that someday man will go to the moon. So as a teenager, he combined his interests in outer space and also the American Wild West to create the name Stardust Cowboy.
Yeah, look at him. He looks
And
like a
adding,
Stardust Cowboy.
right, now adding the legendary part of it, the word legendary, because he always says, I'm a legend in my own time. All right. The fact that the initials Legendary Stardust LSD, okay, referred to a popular drug at the time was strictly coincidental, though he claims to have adopted the name in 1961 before the drug was popularized. I don't know about that, all right, because I think LSD was known even by 1961 because I think,
Yeah,
like, do you ever see The Tingler with Vincent Price? You ever see
yeah.
that? He injects LSD into himself. I think that came out before 61. I could be wrong, but I think somebody, because they were already experimenting on, people with LSD and shit by then. So Odom took up music in high school, in his high school years as a means to get popular. He wanted press the girls or whatever. But he was inspired by Chet Atkins, great rockabilly guitar player, and he learned guitar and taught himself to play the bugle. Now that's the thing that's interesting about the legendary Stardust Cowboy is he's got a bugle in his songs. Okay,
Yeah.
so
You can see him right there. I think that's the bugle. You
that's
see
the
it?
bugle. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so while in college, Odom had the idea of writing a wild song that would captivate everybody. That's what he said. And this led to his writing of the song that he's known most for, and that's called Paralyzed. And he started performing this song at local talent contests. He recorded Paralyzed in 1968 in what was apparently a moment of spare time in a recording studio in Fort Worth, Texas. He plays what's called the dobro and the bugle, while T-Bone Burnett, okay, played drums. T-Bone was an established musician. The track features unintelligible snarls and growls, screaming, okay, surrounded by a frantic strumming on the guitar, on an acoustic guitar, okay, and Burnett's equally crazy drumming. And lots of yelping, and really all you understand is the word paralyzed in the whole song. That's all you can understand, okay? The words are uttered basically the same every time, but you don't understand any other words around it. So, the song's main storyline supposedly centers on Odom's unrequited love for a real-life, beautiful cheerleader from Lubbock, but you'd never know it by the way the song is. 500 copies of this single were initially pressed and released on Odom's own Psycho Suave label. The song gained some regional popularity in Texas and was picked up by a major label, Mercury Records. The song's popularity earned the Ledge, as he was known by fans. Okay, they just call him the Ledge, legendary. And it earned him an appearance on NBC's Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In show.
Yeah.
Okay, season 2, episode 10. If you have the box set, which I do, because everybody should have Laugh-In in their collection because it was hilarious. He dressed in his trademark buckskin jacket, boots, and spurs, and a 10-gallon hat, and presumably backed by T-Bone Burnett on drums, performed Paralyzed and the B-side of the single called Who's Knocking on My Door. During the latter song, the entire laughing cast joined him on stage and began clowning around. The Ledge, in his words, got mad and ran off the set, and that wasn't part of the act. He was pissed off that they got on the stage. The song also made an appearance on The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon during the show's Do Not Play sketch. Okay. I don't think he was on it. I think that was many years later. They kind of spoofed it.
Oh yeah.
I didn't see it. Okay. In 1973, NASA used the song Paralyzed to wake up members of its space crew. Okay. Because it starts off with a bunch of screaming. Okay. The crew was allegedly so distracted from the shock over the course of the day that NASA forbade the use of the song for that purpose ever again, effectively banning the song from space.
Oh my God.
Now, in 1994, there was a book called The New Book of Rock Lists, written by Dave Marsh and James Bernard, and they named the song Paralyzed as the worst song ever issued by a major label.
Wow.
They write that the Legendary Stardust Cowboy was a one-man band incapable of playing even one instrument, singing in tune or keeping in time even with himself. But they note that certain outlaw country fans consider Paralyzed a camp classic. Critic Toby Cresswell includes the song in his book, 1001 Songs, The Great Songs of All Time and the Artists' Stories and Secrets Behind Them, which came out in 2005. In 76, Paralyzed ranked 15 in the first ever Festive 50, a top 50 documenting the favorite songs of listeners of, guess who? John Peel.
Yes. Here we go.
We said it again, the name John Peel, just like last month. Classical pianist Paul Lewis considers the song one of his favorite and guilty pleasures. Later career of the Legendary Stardust Cowboy, he was invited to appear on other programs, but these were canceled because of a musician strike that halted live television performances for a long time. By the time the strike was over, his 15 minutes of fame had lapsed. Historian Rob Weiner of Texas Tech University considered Odom's musical career a product of desperation, a result of the adage that there is nothing to do in Lubbock. Okay. Paralyzed went on to be featured in several Dr. Demento compilations, and I think that's where I first heard the song.
Oh yeah,
I was a tremendous Dr. Demento fan when I was a kid. All right, which is probably why I'm fucking demented. Okay, so Dr. Demento played that song often. It was just funny. Okay, now Odom has continued recording intermittently since Paralyzed came out, and released several albums and singles. One track was called "I Took a Trip on a Gemini Spaceship," which is an LSD-tinged satire of "I Thought About You," and it was actually covered by a longtime fan, who we all know and love, David Bowie, covered that song on his Heathen album. Okay. Now, I have to mention, Bowie was a fan of the Legendary Stardust Cowboy, and he came across Paralyzed on his first trip to the United States before Ziggy Stardust, came out. Guess how we got the name.
Yeah, I can see that.
He got it from that. He actually admitted that name Stardust was influential in the Ziggy Stardust name. Okay.
That's so
yeah. So there's a documentary about Odom, and it's entitled "Cotton Pickin' Smash: The Story of the Legendary Stardust Cowboy." It was completed in the 1980s, never officially released, but it's been out there. I remember Kim's Video used to have a copy of it on video. I haven't looked to see if YouTube has it. They got everything.
You never know.
So he's still alive. The Legendary Stardust Cowboy is still alive, and he resides in San Jose, California. Now, in keeping with his passion for space, he has worked for a private contractor that actually works with NASA, and he still performs once in a while. Since the late 1990s, Odom has played with a backing band called the Altamont Boys, which includes bassist Klaus Fluoride, who used to be in the Dead Kennedys, and guitarist Jay Rosen of a band called the Better Beatles, and drummer Joey Myers. In May 2007, he played at the David Bowie Highline Festival in New York City at Bowie's invitation. I was present at that. That was a very cool show. Okay. Weiner, who earlier was writing about Odom, said he never returned to perform in Lubbock, having believed that his hometown, where he first gained experience by playing in parking lots and everything, offered him little encouragement. So he soured on Lubbock later in life and never went back.
Yeah.
College radio station KMSU in Mankato, Minnesota, flew the Legendary Stardust Cowboy and his band to Mankato in May of 2010 for a show at which the mayor declared officially that May 21st is Legendary Stardust Cowboy Day in Mankato. Mankato has emerged as a mecca for Legendary Stardust Cowboy fans, perhaps only to San Francisco, California. In 2010, Odom played himself in the independent film Rainbow's End, which was a comedy mockumentary type thing about a band traveling from Texas to California to record an album with him. Okay. In late 2011, the Legendary Stardust Cowboy released an anthology of his life's work, a double CD on Cherry Red Records from England, titled For Sarah, Raquel, and David, an anthology. The names refer to Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, Raquel Welch, the beautiful actress, and performing artist, of course, David Bowie. All were big fans of the Ledge's work. Okay. In 2020, Jeff Feuerzweig began work on a documentary on Odom's life, which will feature interviews with Odom interspersed with animations based on interviews of people close to him. It is being developed in the vein of Feuerzweig's previous film, The Devil and Daniel Johnston. No release date was set as of October 2020, as production had been delayed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Curious if it ever came out. I will look that up and let people know. That's it for the Legendary Stardust Cowboy.
That was pretty funny.
That was funny. Okay. But I mean, see how like all these things intersect? Okay.
Yeah.
You know, with other bands that went on to bigger things. And, you know, there's always these lesser bands that go on to bigger things knew about, you know. Like the Velvet Underground's a great example of that. Nobody bought their fucking records except everybody that did started the band and got big.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's what I love talking about, these kinds of groups, because if you don't know about it, you'd never know. You know, you know, it's like, okay, wow, this band was influenced by this guy, and then you go and you check it out, and you're like, oh shit,
yeah,
I hear it.
Now I know where he got it from.
I mean, the Cramps, you know, bringing the Cramps up again. I don't mean to keep bringing them up, but they were influenced by these obscure. Of course, they loved, you know, Bowie, and they loved the Beatles, and they loved, you know, the Who and stuff like that. But they also loved these like obscure little bands or musicians that went nowhere, but just was so off the wall that you had to pay attention.
You had to pay attention to.
So the next band I want to talk about, a very mysterious band. They're kind of really, really underground. They have a cult following, and they're kind of on the line of the Cramps. They're called the Meteors, okay? And they've been around since 1980, so they definitely, you know, have that. I mean, we're talking 45 years already. But they started, you know, very parallel to what the Cramps were doing, but they were from England, okay? Yeah. And they're considered an origin of what would be called Psychobilly, which some people say is kind of like a mix of punk rock and rockabilly. I think that's a little simplistic. I think there's other things thrown in there too, you know, but that's acceptable. Now, they started in what they call the neo-rockabilly scene, okay? In England in the late 70s, rockabilly made like a comeback. Okay, you know, bands like Rockpile with Nick Lowe and Dave Edmunds were big. Okay, other rockabilly bands, you know, straight up rockabilly. Okay, Stray Cats had to go to England in '79 and be part of that scene. Okay, to get big and only come back here and get huge. Okay,
name for themselves.
What's that?
They made a name for themselves.
They made a name for themselves. Yeah, I mean, they got huge over there, and then people over here started paying attention. They came over here. They realized they were a bunch of guys from Massapequa, okay, from Long Island. All right, so the Meteors got started in that scene, okay, but they were kind of like shunned because they were considered like too spooky. All right, they had this like very dark horror vibe going on, okay, a little bit of a sci-fi, mostly horror vibe, okay, and the drummer had green hair, like that didn't fly, and it was a little too punkish, okay, and they also blended elements of punk rock and 60s garage band surf music, rockabilly, and horror film themes in their music. Okay, now they kind of became the first band to really use that term psychobilly to describe themselves as that. Even though I mentioned earlier that it's mentioned in a Johnny Cash song from the 70s, there was no genre at that time. Okay.
No.
But like the Stardust Cowboy and Hasil Adkins never called themselves Psychobilly. Okay. But there wasn't a name. But the Meteors actually used it, okay, and they got it from the Johnny Cash song. Okay, so that it all comes full circle. Now, they were formed in 1980 by P. Paul Fenech, who was on guitar and vocals, Nigel Lewis, who played an upright bass. He also played the electric bass, and he sang, and Mark Robinson on drums. Fenech and Lewis had played in rockabilly bands before, but had left their former band called Raw Deal in order to experiment with a new sound that mixed horror, sci-fi lyrics with punk rock and a rockabilly crossover. Kind of like what the Cramps were doing in New York and in America, but a little, I would say a little more horror vibe than what the Cramps had, even though they had a great horror vibe too.
Yeah, they did.
Now, the band made their first TV appearance on Thames TV, an afternoon show called White Light in late 1980. The Meteors made a short film also in late 1980 with comedian Keith Allen called Meteor Madness. It was released as a double feature with two-tone ska film Dance Craze. There was ska was very popular at the time. So you had this ska film called Dance Craze, and then this film called White Light as a double feature in March of 81. The movie featured 4 songs, which made it onto the band's first vinyl single, which came out on Ace Records, and then later on Big Beat Records. The tracks were also issued on a very rare 12-inch mini album, like an EP, called The Meteors Meet Screaming Lord Such. Remember him?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, soon after that, they issued the double A-side anthems Radioactive Kid, which is one of their most famous songs, and Graveyard Stomp. A session was recorded for the John Peel BBC radio show in June of 1981. Again, to this date, these tracks have never been released, though. Okay. In August of 81, the band got signed to Island Records, famous Island Records that Bob Marley was on and U2 would be put on and all that stuff. And they recorded their first album called The Case of the Meteors
in Heaven.
In Heaven. And the 7-inch single called The Crazed came out. Now, they have gone through many lineup changes since, and Fenech is actually the only original member to date. They still play around, okay? As of 2024, they released something called 40 Days of Rotting, okay? And basically, Fenech has released solo albums and played in side projects, including the Legendary Raw Deal, which was kind of like a sequel to the Raw Deal that they were in earlier. The Surfing Dead, which was an instrumental band, and the Murder Brothers. Fenech also helped the young Austrian band Sir Psycho and His Monsters by mixtaping their album Reaper's Tale, as well as in recording one of the live shows in 2012 in Berlin called Welcome to Our Hell. So with that, I'm just going to say that's all I have on the Meteors.
But you see how many albums they got? It's insane how many albums.
It really is. I'm looking at it here, okay?
It's insane.
Between 1981 and 2006. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 26 studio albums in 25 years.
It's insane.
Okay.
That's
No,
like
no, sorry, not 25 years, 35 years. 26 and 35 years. And that's not including the live albums.
Yeah,
in 1983. Yep.
And then you got the singles and
right. And you know that every one of their albums and singles are very rare. If you have them, hold on to them. They're worth money. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. You know, they're one of these bands that just continue to play. Okay. They have this very obscure cult following. They're very big in England. I've never seen them, to be honest with you. I think they may have played here a few times. I don't think they did a lot of shows in America over the years, but they have been here. I think they did play with the Cramps at least once, but not in America. Otherwise, I probably would have seen them. Because I went to every Cramps show between 1986 and 2006 in New York City.
Wow.
Every show. So I don't remember ever seeing them unless I was lumped up. I don't remember. Okay, wow. It's possible, you know. All right, so that's psychobilly music. I hope I did a little synopsis there for everybody that you like.
You did, because I didn't know about that gender till you started talking about it. Sent me this episode, and I looked those guys up, and they were all pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
So thank you, Mike, for another great lesson in music.
And that's the last real rock show of the year of original bands. We're gonna do a show next month. Will be our year-end show where we always get some live music. We'll talk about some obscure cult movies and movie of the year. We give the awards out. It's always like a nice 2-part episode. Hope everybody watches. And we got to start preparing for that. It always takes a good month or two to get that together.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much done with that. And what do we say? How do we find you, Mike?
Okay, well, I'm all over social media as RockerMike. However, on Facebook, I'm RockoMike because they won't let me be RockerMike. Very active on Facebook. You could friend me, RockoMike, or you could find me and Rob on a Rockshow podcast group page. There's Song of the Day. There's always stuff about bands and clips of stuff and information. I try to keep it current every day. I very rarely miss a day. Also, you can find me on Instagram, RockerMike212. You can find me on X, RockerMike212. I'm on MeWe and a few other stupid social medias out there too, if you want to look at that. I'm on Substack as RockerMike. Okay, I write a lot of essays, some original literature and poetry and things like that too. Believe it or not, I do write that stuff. And where can we find you, Rob?
You can find me on Instagram, X, and Facebook, and pretty much the RockerMike and Rob page, the fan page.
And find you on Getting Lumped Up everywhere. Just put in Getting Lumped Up, and you'll find either me or Rob. We've been up there in the algorithm lately, man. I've been noticing that.
Yeah. Like even I've been doing, if you notice on YouTube, I've been doing some shorts, and the shorts been hitting and getting a lot of hits. So
yeah. Well, they don't shadow ban the shorts.
Yeah.
So
I'm just playing with that to see what's going on,
Yeah. All right, everybody. So what do we say at the end of every show, Rob?
We don't get drunk.
We get lumped up.
We'll see you for the end of the year episode.
Stay tuned.
Yeah.